Here's the question. How can we serve innovative voices, smart ideas, and the latest technology to improve brand identity, product consistency, and profitability in the print and packaging supply chain? Welcome to the Idealliance GAMUT Podcast, and I am your host, Jeff Collins. Idealliance is a nonprofit association, and we serve the global supply chain for brands, print, and packaging with 12 offices located around the world. If you are interested in becoming a member of Idealliance, you can join us by visiting our website at idealliance.org. On today's GAMUT Podcast, we get to find out how the Pantone guides, the solid guides, the uncoated guides, and even the color bridges are produced. And our guest today to describe that process and to talk to us about some best practices using these guides, Jason Campbell from X-Rite. And just a little bit about Jason's background. He came into print at a time when conventional analog processes began the migration to digital. His career began at Daytimers, a print manufacturer. Some of you may have remembered the Daytimers product. I used to purchase them at places like Staples or Walmart. And at that time, he spent 16 years managing the modernization and automation of the entire production workflow from design to print. And then Jason joined X-Rite in 2015 as a solution architect focused on packaging. His broad background in color management, software development, workflow design, and IT allows him to serve a unique role as a conduit between customer support, product management, and R&D. He has a degree in computer science from Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and currently resides in, I cannot pronounce this, but Makungi, PA or Makungi, PA. Jason, thanks a lot for joining us on the GAMUT Podcast. Our listeners are in for a treat today to talk about Pantone Swatch Books and what happens behind the scenes to make those Swatch Books. And the last time, it's been not quite a year, but we had you on before, and it was an extremely popular episode. So great to have you back again.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I guess it's been about that long, right?
Yeah, it is.
But if anybody's heard those prior ones before would know, I work for X-Rite, and for the last 5 years, my title's been a solution architect, which puts me pretty much in the driver's seat, helping customers solve their color challenges, whether it be a workflow or process, or whether it be process improvement or even coming to it, completely anew. And actually recently just had a slight change in my role, getting more affiliated with our product management side. So applying those same learnings and knowledge internally to try to help our products be better.
Right.
And I think where the rubber hits the road is pretty much right where our conversation today is, which is, I've been involved with our Pantone team in a sort of a technical advisor role, if you will, to try to move a rather legacy product. It's been around for a very long time, the Pantone fan decks and guidebooks that everyone's familiar with. And just as a lot of customers and suppliers have been upping their game over the last couple of years, we internally have been, trying to practice what we preach and up our game as well.
Well, that's glad to know. And we want to know as well what some of the things are that you're talking about when you mention you're upping your game. I think about the challenges that we have in print manufacturing when it comes to using fan decks and matching color, at the end of the press. And I look forward to hearing about the processes involved that are probably similar on both sides of the coin when you make the books, as well as when we're on the plant floor trying to match the fan decks.
Yeah, well, the phrase that you just used is perfect, print manufacturer. And that was actually where I came from For 16 years, I worked for a print manufacturer. So it wasn't commercial print. It was making calendar books at a company called Daytimers. So, anybody over a certain age tends to remember the days before smartphones and Microsoft Outlook. And you are building a product. It's just print is there's no welding and metal cutting. I'm printing, but I'm assembling a product from it. And that's exactly what Pantone is doing. So we tend to think of these books as sort of an ever-present tool in the print environment, certainly in the design environment where color selection and inspiration is taking place. But you find, how many ink rooms have you been in? And have you been in an ink room where you didn't see a Pantone fan deck there or next to a press? They're fairly ubiquitous. And I think because of that, we take them for granted. And as time has gone on and customer demands have increased and the digitization of color, things like brand programs, scorecarding, measurement, more stringent measurement, it's all just turned the knob up. And so internally, when I say that we practice, want to practice what we preach and up our game, really what I mean by that is it's doing that respective to each of the steps within that print manufacture process. So it's not any one thing. It's really a conglomeration of many things. So it's a journey, just like it is for our customers. You don't take all the steps at once. You have to get there. So really one of the first, kind of verbal slideshow images that I would try to give you here is when I share this live, there's a picture that we have of our ink room at Pantone. And it starts 2 to 3 months before a print run for a fan deck. Okay. And so you open that fan deck up and you look at all these spot colors being printed in there. Those are formulated inks and somebody mixed them. So we are currently at 2040 in the coded formula guide. So we literally mix 2040 inks by hand, quality checking them, matching them to digital targets. And we start that well before the press run ever comes to be. And in that process, that's the first place where, we've spent more time tuning in our proofing process, correlating that to the press, driving for improved match. But again, it's a print manufacturing process. So I can't take all day to match an ink. I have certain timeline. I have a certain cycle time per color that I would really strive to hit. Just like any process, there's a cycle time. So you have to blend quality with speed. And so we've really been employing as many of our advanced tools as possible to equip our ink technicians to meet both of those goals, because quality needs to be job number one, but performing that job effectively and efficiently needs to be job number two.
Jason, I want to pick up on something you mentioned there, and that's the proofing process for the special formulated inks, over 2,000 plus in the Pantone Solid Guide, I think you mentioned. And are we using techniques like we would find on the manufacturing floor, whether we're using a contract proofing system to simulate the spot colors, and plus a little Joe machine doing ink drawdowns with specially formulated or special solutions for ink formulation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a drawdown for sure. We are talking formulated ink and, using a little Joe, which seems to be one of the most ubiquitous offset ink proofing devices. There are others. And we employ those as well because we have other parts of the Pantone business where, for example, we have an ink lab in-house that checks all of our incoming raw materials, validates that all of our bases meet the COAs and meet all of our targets. Before we even mix them together to make an ink, we need to make sure that, we follow our recipe, but we need to make sure the ingredients in the recipe are the right things. So in those cases, we have a bit more time, and we do use other drawdown systems and tools. But certainly for our ink techs on the front line, mixing ink and putting it in the can for the press room, the Little Joe we found is a pretty effective, quick proofing apparatus to give them something that is correlated to the press, meaning that they have a reasonable expectation that when they get their number in the ink room, that when they put that ink in the can, that the press room is going to have a good day.
Right.
If you go way back in the past, and maybe still some customers we work with out in the industry are working on visual, and going way, way back, that's even where all this started. There was no fancy spectrophotometers and things.
That's right.
And so if you look over the long legacy, if I think about it now, it's probably about 60 years now. If I've got my mental timeline straight since the inception of Pantone, you're talking about a 60-year legacy. And just as the industry has matured, our processes have matured. So now today we have correlated drawdown, we have spectrophotometers, we have digital targets. And while there's still that visual sanity check, that's sort of just a piece of the toolkit, not the only tool in the toolkit.
Right. Absolutely.
Still have to have a sanity check, because every once in a while, sometimes you get a number and you're scratching your head, and every once in a while you still have to remember we were all given eyes after a million years of evolution.
So Jason, once all the formulas are validated and you come to agreement on what those recipes should be, what the colors should be, they've been proofed, et cetera, and it's time to go to press, time to produce the swatches and fan decks. And walk us through the process of how you would set up that production run for the fan decks on press. I know you have a special press for this purpose as well. You probably have some higher level quality control or process control points involved, starting all the way at the beginning with file, and then of course plate making until you get to press.
Well, I think the first thing, we'll kind of work that backwards, because that would be sort of my next verbal slideshow slide, is that Pantone has what really amounts to be a one-of-a-kind custom press. So when you look at a fan deck and you look at those blocks of color on the paper, there's 7 colors down each sheet, and you realize that they have, a certain spacing to them. But what many people don't realize is that page was also printed effectively with 3 other pages at the same time on the press sheet, because we have a 28 color press that does not use a printing plate. And let me correct that by saying we do use a printing plate, but it's actually for the black copy that is on there, like the page number, the color name, the various copy that's on each of the pages, the formula, for example. But the colors are actually laid down essentially direct to substrate from what amounts to be a completely segmented ink fountain. So people think of a 4-color press or an 8-color press. We have a 28-color press. And no, it's not as long as a football field, because the 28 colors are not linear. They're across the sheet. So there are 28 ink zones with 28 different colors loaded simultaneously as that sheet passes through the press.
So describing the press, it's a multi-unit press, and each individual unit, the ink fountain is split and contains individual spot colors. So if I was to look down top view down on the press, I would see a rainbow of colors across that cylinder, essentially.
Well, it's a 2-unit press, one being the black with the traditional plate. So it's one totally stock shelf, off the shelf print unit. And then the second unit is where, the custom magic happens. And that literally is 28 colors. So what you would think of as an ink zone with an ink key, we have ink keys still, but each ink key is a completely separate color.
Across.
It makes it an adventure to load and wash up.
It's interesting because I just measured the swatch book here, and I can see that the size of each one of the individual Pantone swatches are about 30 millimeters, which conform to the ink zones on a typical offset press. How long does it take to produce the entire swatch book and the entire fan deck? Is it a couple days, weeks, months?
Do you mean, like the entire book?
Yeah, the entire book.
Oh, the entire book will run for about 3 months.
And Jason, how are you guys controlling the press run as far as ensuring that the spot colors are conforming to your aims? And are you using a online, press console spectrophotometer, scanning spectrophotometer? How are you ensuring that run is stable and accurate to what your aims are before you move into finishing?
We've essentially got the spacing rigged up in such a way that we can use, one of our exact spectros that, many of those out in industry are familiar with. And we've got it rigged in such a way that we can scan the sheet as it's presented to us from the press. Mm-hmm. So it's not a separate little color bar, because again, I can't compose a color bar because I'm not using a plate. I can't put ink in special places wherever I want it on the sheet because I don't have a complete lineal unit covering one spot color like most of us do in a conventional, 4, 6, 8 color press. I have one little ink zone. My color bar is the bar that you see in your finished fan deck.
Understood.
So we measure the work, so to speak. And that's how we perform our QA, and we track that. And then, we do our make ready, we dial everything in. If anything's not quite hitting or something's not up to snuff, we adjust for it. Or if we need something to be a little tighter, we might call one of the ink techs out and correct an ink. All things normal, there's no secret sauce. It's really the same as what somebody might deal with on their presses in their print plant, except instead of 1 or 2 spot colors, we're doing 28 at a clip, and we got 2,000 to do. But yeah, so we go through that process, and once those sheets are all done, that whip then goes into the bindery, where then they start to take that final form as you kind of were leading into.
Right. And so what are some of the metrics that you use and tolerances that you use that are familiar to the color management world and process control world? And we're talking about, what Delta E formula, what are your tolerances? Are you looking at hue, chroma? Just give us an overview of what those metrics are that you use to keep the color in control to your target conditions.
Yeah, so our published target is a Delta E of 2 or better, Delta E 2000, which is pretty much in line with much of the industry. However, on press, the lead operators all have visibility to all of the colorimetric stats. So they can see a LCH, they can see if something's getting a little bit dirty, if it's off hue. So they might be up against a color that's not quite lining up, and maybe it's getting really close to the tolerance, and we like to have a margin. We try to always better ourselves. Mm-hmm. Many colors when we're running on press can be sub Delta E of 1.
Right.
because of the way that the process has been really evolving over the last, I'd really say the last 2 years, but really accelerating in the last 18 months has been more and more refinement of the process to drive those numbers down. Just like any of our listeners that are working in print plants, we're looking to drive our make ready down. We're trying to improve the efficiency of our print runs. But when it doesn't mean that you don't get one that came out of left field and threw you a curveball. So we make sure that the instrumentation, on screen for the operators gives them access to evaluate what is going on there. And is that an adjustment they can merely make on press? Or is it something where we confer with the ink techs and sometimes we'll pull that ink out, adjust it. And quite honestly, if it doesn't meet our quality spec or somehow it's just not working out, we pull it. We will just scrap it and have it remixed and put that back on press because we know we've got to hit those targets.
Understood. And what are some of the more challenging colors, if you can answer this one, that come to mind when you're printing these swatch books? Are they the same, maybe some of the more neutral gray colors, or is it some of the blues? Which color ranges seem to have take a little bit more time to finesse those into your targets?
Oh, neutrals and pastels.
Neutrals and pastels.
Yeah, that's hands down right there. Yeah. We're just, as humans, again, going back to earlier in the conversation, we rely on instruments, but we still have to leverage use of our eyeballs and that, horrible software we have running our visual processing in our minds that likes to mess with us from time to time. And, it's really highly attuned to neutrality. And if something has a cast to it, so I might have a good delta E. So numerically, I might be good. But we definitely, just like anybody, work very hard to try to maintain the correct stepping of colors, sequence of colors, meaning that they look like they're making the correct steps, which is all, especially the older colors, legacy, been around 50 years colors are really critical because they've just become used and referenced quite often. So we have to pay very close attention that those neutrals don't drift. And especially when you combine that into the realm of pastels, there's a line where there is so little pigment in the volume of ink. Mm-hmm. If anybody has their fan deck sitting there next to them, or it's within reach across your office as you're listening to this, I invite you to go visit your cool and warm grays and your pastels and realize that many of those colors are upwards of 98% trans white. There is a bare spit of pigment in that color, and managing that and getting that just right is an incredible challenge to do consistently time and time again. And we're still focused on making it better. But yeah, absolutely, by far, the neutrals and pastels are probably the number one challenge.
And now I'd like to take a moment to recognize our newest sponsor to the GAMUT Podcast, Telia Labs. If your company or print operation is struggling to automate imposition and planning, and you're tired of building imposition templates for every single job, Telia Labs provides artificially intelligent planning and imposition solutions at your fingertips. With their award-winning software, Telia Phoenix, you can quickly run cost-based analysis to plan and impose your customers' orders. With Telia Phoenix, you can easily integrate with MIS and workflow solutions using industry standard JDF XML, or state-of-the-art RESTful APIs for increased automation. Whether you're printing books, brochures, cartons, labels, or signs, Phoenix's Imposition AI can nest, dynamically gang, and calculate the most cost-efficient production plan without ever creating a single template. To learn how Telia Labs is modernizing the print and packaging software with smart AI-driven technology, just visit Telia Labs at TILIALABS.com. That's TeliaLabs.com. As well, through the end of the year, Telia Labs is offering a free 30-day trial of Telia Phoenix. And you can request your free trial today by visiting TeliaLabs.com/gamut. That's TeliaLabs.com/gamut for a free 30-day trial of Telia Phoenix. So to pick back up where we left off, as far as the most popular Pantone colors that are in that fan deck, can you speak to that? Is there a group of, the top 10 that you can share with us?
I wish I had something more scientific, but a lot of times when I'm out either speaking or with customers at their sites, there's certainly ones that always seem to come up that people love to reference. They might say, a 100C or a 180C or a 485. Don't ask me why, but 485 comes up more often than not. Maybe it's
right.
Maybe it's all in my mind, but I would say that whenever people are throwing out a Pantone example, nobody's picking 2273.
No, it's usually
there's definitely some old stalwarts out there.
I think of 186 and I don't know why I want to say 032 and of course Reflex Blue and a few others, but
Orange 21. Yeah, there's the bases, the bases and the some of those quintessential early sequence numbers are colors that have been around since sort of the forever.
Right.
And so if you've been in the business for 30 or 40 years, not long ago, I just was in an ink room working with an ink manager there that has been in the business close to 40 years. And somebody in those shoes, these are the things they've been staring at or have been referencing for many, many years and are right at the front of the fan deck. So every time you open it, inevitably that's where you sort of start. Whereas some of the newer editions, like back in September, we released a set of 294 new colors, which is what brought our total up to 2040. Those are just starting on the uptake in the market and in design. So I've found people are starting to reference those new colors because it's been about 6 months. But, they got to pay their dues before they become the next 485. Let's say that.
Understood. Now, I wanted to kind of go back to the topic we were talking about, and that's process control. And you were mentioning analyzing the quality data for the different colors. And the software, you mentioned the X-Rite Exact, and then the software, is the software the same solutions that you would sell off the shelf to customers, or is this something a little bit more tailored to the specific task of making the Swatch books on that particular press?
No, it's off the shelf. It's Color Cert, which is sort of our flagship print and packaging QA tool. We've obviously, got others, but Color Cert certainly had a lot of uptake, and we do a lot of work there, and I'm very close to that. We'd contemplated doing something, as you put it, more very, hand tailored to the process. But when we reviewed that, we said, no, we really, this is a print challenge. As long as you can get the measurement and the scan, to work, there is no reason that we should not be employing this, because at the same rate, especially in sort of what's become my somewhat unique role now, as between coming from an SA and taking on this new task as technical product manager. For me, I see that as a value of I want to be using our own tools, because that is just more opportunity to understand how it's working, how to make changes that are more efficient, with a team that you work with frequently.
Right.
I have a number of customers I work with frequently, but you don't get to see them with the same cadence. These guys all have my number. If they think of an improvement, they let me know it. And so there's a lot of value in that.
Jason, oftentimes when we're working through problems, when it involves spot color matching, whether it's the process guides or the solid guides, we find that there's some problems as far as usage. The do's and don'ts, like don't leave the swatch book out open under UV lighting because it will fade the colors or the colors will shift. So what are some of the do's and don'ts as far as what Pantone would advise or what X-Rite would advise when using the swatch books and fan decks?
Yeah. So, when I've spoken about this before, I get that a lot. I try to lead in with a few of the sort of most popular ones that we run into quite a bit. I would say the biggest challenge where we're at in this day and age of the business is that we are still in a bit of a transition. The fan deck has a big value on two parts of the business. I think it goes without saying that we should all agree that there's an understood value in color inspiration, design definition, aspirational color, all of these buzzwords that cater to the front end of the process. A designer is trying to put together a brand look or a rebrand, and they're looking to assemble a new palette. And then then we fast forward a while, and then that now is hitting the presses. And now we need to go fulfill that. And for a long time, we have ourselves in the marketplace, not marketplace, but in the print shops, dealing with a sort of the pivotal point of this is you have the customer that says Pantone 180. There we go. Again, I'm going to go pick one of those. We have the book that has 180. We might have a sample or a proof or something from the customer, maybe an inkjet proof that simulated 180. And then we also have, because of the maturation of print quality control, we have spectrophotometers that can be certified and calibrated and tied to digital standards. And even with Pantone, we've got Pantone Live, which is the digital incarnate of the Pantone identities. So we have digital targets. And so you have all of these things, which many times get into the mix and fight with each other. And so that poses sort of still this challenge with the kind of questions that we get asked. And I say we because it's just not me, it's our whole team gets asked this from different facets. So the first bit I would say is we always preach that, digital spectral targets are, the number one point of truth. Why? Why isn't it the fan deck? Okay, well, the fan deck, which is it, yours or mine? Is it 3 years old or is it the new one? Is it from a while back? Has it been properly kept? Is it not? Did it? It's a print manufactured product. So there's some variation in the guides themselves. They're not a delta E of 0. And in some cases, many think that they are.
Right.
And that's sort of a philosophical thing where, well, the book's the standard. No, the book is a physical representation of the standard. The standard is the actual digital data that doesn't fade, doesn't deteriorate. And so that's kind of one of the biggest things that we run into. If I had to say what number one thing, it's kind of that bit I just shared. So the guidance that we offer is, we need to satisfy our customer. So, usually when I speak about this, I talk about customer communication is critical. Fan decks to me, and this is Jason talking, fan decks to me are an expectation control tool, because it's okay. What is the color we're talking about? So now I have something in front of me that is giving me the sensation of the words that we're using instead of, weird descriptive terms. There's actually something in front of me that we're talking about. But when I need to talk about quality control, and when we talk about things like brand programs, and when we talk about consistency of production, that's a separate kind of expectation. And that's where digital standards really fulfill something that, even the best fan deck in the world, is not going to manage a global supply chain.
Right.
So when we look at a global supply chain, we want those digital standards so that I know that somebody in China, Germany, France, Latin America, the US are all printing to the same standard with their respective ink sets can vary, print processes, procedures can vary, but at the end of the day, we're all hitting the same target.
Right.
So that's really probably, if I had to say, that's the number one thing that is still a real challenge in the market right now, because I can tell you that people on the other end of this podcast are listening going, yeah, but then my customer comes in and I've got a delta E of 0.7 of your digital target. And then they throw down their fan deck and go, but that's not 180C.
Oh, yeah.
I go, well, It is. The digital standard has a delta E of 0. That fan deck has probably a delta E of maybe 1.1. I don't know.
Or worse.
It's something.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many variables when we're talking about the physically printed Swatch book.
Yeah. And again, it's expectation management. We've been referencing the fan deck because it's something, quite ubiquitous, but as an extension of that, we have the terminology is color specifier chips. We have the chip book, which is essentially your fan deck in the little binder. It's like a little 6x8, 6x9 binder type of thing, with perforated chips in there. And the reason that product line exists is because that is to travel along with, whether it be the proof or the sample, to say, this is the color I want you to match. This is a representation of what I desire. And so even as X-Rite, or should I say as both X-Rite and Pantone, but as Pantone, we still maintain that line, and that this is a color communication tool. However, the fact remains that it comes down to the expectation and discussion with the customer. If the customer says, I put a specifier chip and I want that exact match, okay, then that is the conversation to have with that customer. What I've consulted with some of our customer base is to try to mature that conversation from the bottom up, from the supplier back into the customer, and have a dialogue, especially where some of these customers have made the investment into digital standards, proper tooling, and software. They want to improve their customer service and quality by virtue of that investment. And we say, educate your customer and say, is this strict match what you're after, or would you like the production we're doing for you, at several different print plants to be highly consistent then that's where the talk track becomes the digital target is much more sustainable. It's permutable, because if I give somebody else another chip, that chip is going to, we have strict standards, but it's still going to have some level of difference.
Yeah, totally clear. I mean, the digital master, that specification digitized can be exchanged wherever the file is accepted. And when we look at exchange formats like CXF, et cetera. So that's the value. It doesn't have the same issues that you have with the physical printed piece being used as the master, essentially.
In that Pantone Live ecosystem, the one thing that it addresses as part of that message of consistency and use of digital targets is I don't have a fan deck for reverse flexo print backed by white.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that fan deck? Well, I don't have that fan deck.
Yeah.
And what are the master colors look like when it's water-based flexo on brown craft? Well, I don't have a fan deck for that either. And so what we've done in that ecosystem, because I can have lots of sets of digital data, I just can't make the economics work to have 45 variant fan decks in 45 different print processes. We have the representation of all of those master colors that from the coded master book printed with offset paste inks on nice coated stock. To what are those expectations going to look like when I get to a different print process or substrate?
Jason, before we jump off the podcast today, I have one last question, or I should say one last topic to cover, and that's the production of the color bridges. So these are the Swatch books that contain the CMYK breakdown of each one of the solid coated and uncoated spot colors. And it's an extremely effective tool. Have used it throughout my career. And I know that many other pre-press and color QA types have this, in either the plant or they carry it with them when they visit clients. Traditionally, they were produced using dot gain calibration or TVI calibration and ISO 12647-2 targets. So now they have been produced using G7 calibration, one-dimensional curves, and extremely important when we're trying to convert the spot colors to CMYK and maintain some level of accuracy to the solid. And this particular guide is sometimes troublesome for us because some brand managers or creatives will specify the CMYK breakdown they find in the Swatch book and provide that to printers that are using digital technology, where that CMYK breakdown is not applicable to that particular technology. So we find people struggling with converted Pantone solids into the CMYK guide, and there seems to be some conflict when there's a color mismatch that comes up. But again, talk to me about how these guides are produced and a little bit about the application of G7 and the production at Pantone.
Yeah, actually, that's a perfect segue from our prior topic, because that would be yet another one of those FAQ, how to use the guide kind of a thing. So what happened last year when we did the update, we were faced with adding these, the new solid colors to the color bridge because we keep those in parity for obvious reasons. And it is probably, short of the formula guide, the next, most referenced tool in terms of the fan deck product line. And when we were having those conversations, I said, right now would be a really good time to revisit the way that we're doing those process builds. And, some of the team asked, well, why? And I go, one of the biggest challenges that people bring up, or questions that they bring up, is, why do my numbers never match? And I go, what do you mean your numbers never match? Well, I'm in Adobe Photoshop, and I click the Pantone 180, and I tell it to go to 4-color, and it doesn't match the numbers in the book. And yet it's the book, and that's Adobe, and you guys gave them they don't match. And there's a lot of reasons for this. I said, we really, I think, would help the market, take away, if we can do this next revision and also add more value to the upgrade for customers, that they're not just buying for new colors, but they're also buying because this is going to give them a better expectation management of kicking over to 4-color. I think this would really help them. So in that, what we did is we approached the reconfiguration using a G7-centric calibration. So the print run prior, I wasn't there. It started, I think, the first rebranding from the old CMYK or solid CMYK, or I forget how CMYK process book, I believe. When it got rebranded, the color bridge was around 2010. And it was still leveraging some legacy processes. So when we redid it, we recast all the numbers based on CRPC6 Grackle coded for the coded guide, and CRPC3, the uncoded, for the uncoded guide. And the logic being, at this point, I could demonstrate to you in Creative Suite, and Idealliance publishes these settings on the Idealliance website. You can achieve those color process builds now if you apply those settings with those profiles to the color data from Pantone. Those numbers now match. And we figured that removes some of the ambiguity of why don't these match? And moreover, that rendition, that resulting 4-color reproduction, that expectation can now be more accurately represented, because now your numbers are matching. You see what that looks like in the fan deck, in the color bridge. And so really there's a lot of value proposition there for our users.
Jason, has been great hanging out with you and talking shop about Pantone guides, CMYK color bridge, and the spot color guides, the use of G7, et cetera. And I think we covered all the key points we wanted to talk about today. I mean, this is a huge, huge topic, and touches a variety of different important points in the supply chain as far as expectation settings. So if we missed anything, let me know.
No, I think we really hit a lot. I would just say that, Pantone is continuing to strive for improved reproduction of our standards, just like we all are. And that is something we will never ease up on. Maybe one day, if we ever print a Delta E0 book, that would be a massive accomplishment. I hope I get to see that one day. And really just honestly manage expectations. Use that product series to communicate with your customer about not just color, but what are they looking to achieve? What are you looking to match? And if consistency is key, absolutely work towards digital standards, because that will give you the most effective means to achieve it.
Well said, Jason. And I just want to go ahead and take a second to thank you and Pantone, X-Rite, the Danaher Corporation, for your support and membership at Idealliance. Like our other OEM friends and members, without you guys, we couldn't do what we do. Your participation in the activities like the working groups and Print Properties Committee, and I appreciate your service to the industry and look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And of course, if any of the listeners do have questions or about anything to do with their X-Rite product line or the topic today about the Pantone product line, we have support channels available and listed on our respective websites, and a broad knowledge-based team to address any and all questions.
Thanks for listening to the GAMUT Podcast. If you have ideas, suggestions, or would like to join us or even sponsor future podcasts, simply email me at jcollins@idealliance.org. That's JCOLLINS at idealliance.org. Take care and have a productive day.